Somehow, we're just a month away from regular season NBA games, so I'll be continuing to discuss some of the additions the Nets made this offseason. This video will focus on Paul Millsap. Brooklyn's most important incoming contributor will probably be Patty Mills, and I've written an article on his talents that can be found on netsrepublic.com if you're so interested in that. But, enough of that. Let's focus on Paul Millsap. And he will probably be the second most important addition of the offseason. As with every free agent the Nets sign, there's debate as to how washed Paul Millsap is, how much he has left in the tank. Most of that comes from the defensive end, especially his performance in these past playoffs. And I'm going to touch on that, but I'm going to start with the offense because it's more fun and it's easier to project because he'll be just fine in this Brooklyn offense. The Nets offense, particularly with just fractions of the big three on the floor, often relies on a star to create an advantage and for the rest of the role players to sustain that advantage with heady passing or cutting or screening. Here, once KD draws two, Kyrie spaces out, Aldridge cuts, and it forces the helper Lonzo to make a decision. Once the ball gets moving here, it's a bunch of nice passing, cutting, and obviously three-point shooting. The Nets do an excellent job of 0.5ing, which is to say that they make all their decisions within 0.5 seconds of receiving the ball, passing, shooting, or driving it. Here, it's a swing, drive, and eventual dunk, and everybody is making a decision within that 0.5 second time frame. Paul Millsap fits in, especially with these 1 or 2 star bench units, as I envision it, because he will excel at the 0.5 decision-making process and just sustaining advantages, keeping 3-on-2s, holding 2-on-1s, and capitalizing on them. We see it here with Denver in these past year's playoffs. He did have the ball a good amount because he often split time with Nikola Jokic. He was often on the floor when Joker was sent to the bench, as much as any of Denver's players. But here we have JaMychal Green cutting around the rim and Michael Porter spacing out. Paul Millsap plays this 2-on-1 very well, and that's a very nice, deft little one-handed dump off for the dunk. That particular situation, just with the 2-on-1 on the weak side, reminds me of the situations Bruce Brown finds himself in a lot on the Nets. Typically when the ball gets swinging or there's ball penetration, the weak side help guy, in this case Evan Fournier, will be forced to play between Brown and Shamet in this case. But a lot of the time it's Brown and a shooter, and a lot of that is by design because opposing defenses feel more comfortable. If you're going to have to zone up, you might as well zone up a 2-on-1 with a non-shooter like Bruce Brown. Bruce Brown obviously obliterates that a lot of the time because he's such an adept cutter. But here, Fournier does not do a good job playing in between two because he really doesn't have his eyes focused on either Shamet or Brown. So Brown face cuts him and it's a dunk. But these are the situations that Paul Millsap is going to thrive in. Obviously, those two plays aren't too similar, but when you get a 2-on-1 on the weak side, with a rim diver and somebody spacing the floor, Millsap's going to be able to capitalize on that. To get more into the specifics of Millsap's game, besides just the extra passing and overall smarts, the Nets will benefit from his versatility. Here we see him bring the ball up, and he doesn't need to find, a guard, a primary ball handler. He can just flow straight into the handoff. You can initiate action with him at the top of the key, bringing the ball up. He's also a adequate three-point shooter. He will set, on or off ball screens, pop out above the break, and shoot them as he did here. The interesting thing to note with his three-point numbers, pretty similar to Jeff Green. He's been a career low to mid-30s guy, except for one outlier 40+% season from out there. So it'll be interesting to see how that stabilizes in Brooklyn. He's much more efficient from the corners, so there will be a lot of possessions where he's just parked there. But I'm interested to see the above the break numbers because I'm wondering if he can be a pick and pop guy, a sort of offensive hub or a fulcrum at the top of the key, and I'll get into why in a second. But one of those reasons is that he's a very good screen setter. Here, it's a good one on campaign, and then this is where, you know, his age, he's slowing down. You can kind of see it. He doesn't really get off the ground on that finish. Overall, his face-up game off the pick and pop, you know, when he used to drive from 18, 20 feet out, that's where he looks his age. The bounce is gone pretty noticeably, which means that when he's in the dunker spot, he's not really an above-the-rim finisher anymore. Here, Enes Kanter bothers his left-handed layup, which, you know, is not a good sign. But again, if these are the areas where he's looking, you know, not so spry, you have to be okay with that. The Nets aren't going to rely on him to face up and attack from 20 feet out off the catch. They're not going to rely on him to be in the dunker spot. The Nets figure to be one of the least active teams from the dunker spot this year, especially after letting go of DeAndre Jordan and with Blake Griffin, you know, having more of his reps come from the perimeter. Again, the things that Millsap still does well that don't really age out of a player are the things that are going to be more valuable to the Nets this year. Forget about the dunker spot, you know, the facing up. If he shoots the three ball okay, that's a bonus, but again, he's a good screen setter, as we see here. That'll help him with handoffs, with pick and pops, and I'm really optimistic about his fit next to Kevin Durant-led bench units. In part because we saw some really nice chemistry with Michael Porter Jr. in the playoffs, and I hate to do the MPJ-KD comparison again, but this isn't really that. You can just imagine these sorts of actions with KD as a great way to generate offense, especially from the top of the key. Millsap is great in the handoff game just because he really turns these into bruising screens. Here, he eliminates Torrey Craig from the play with a little chicken wing right here, which, you know, whatever, creates an open three. Here, he makes sure to get into the defender's body and give MPJ an open pull-up, and then he rolls to the basket. MPJ doesn't find him, but, you know, again, Millsap knows where to be, how to fill space, and how to hit defenders. Here, hits Torrey Craig so well that Monty Williams thinks it's an illegal screen, which is how you know he's done a good job. No three on the play, but they flow right into a dribble handoff. Millsap recognizes it, sets another good screen, and gives MPJ a nice one dribble pull-up. Again, that is not really Porter Jr.'s shot so much as the catch and shoot threes, but it certainly is Kevin Durant's shot, and you can imagine the sort of synergy that they can develop, you know, working around the perimeter, handoffs, backdoor cuts. I see Millsap as an easy way to generate some quick offense, you know, especially with active cutters and shooters on the floor. I mentioned Bruce Brown already, mentioned Kevin Durant. You can sort of imagine bench-heavy lineups with one or two stars, if it's Kyrie and KD, or just KD, with a shooter like Patty Mills joining them, a guy like Bruce Brown, maybe some Javon Carter. I really see Kevin Durant, Paul Millsap front courts as anchoring some really sturdy bench units for Brooklyn this year. Overall, I think it's because Millsap's deficiencies aren't in areas that are going to burn the Nets too much, or the ones that they're really going to be concerned about. And as I've said, the things that don't age out of his game, the good screen setting, the good passing, you know, his ability to flow into handoffs, even if it's not with KD, you know, if it's with shooters like Patty Mills or Joe Harris, that's what the Nets are really looking for out of the reserve big men, you know, especially on the offensive end. So I'm anticipating some pretty productive stretches from him this year as a part of those bench units on that end. Moving on to defense, we'll start with his off-ball abilities first. It's clear to Nets fans that we're not getting 2016 or 2017 Paul Millsap in terms of the, you know, rim protection he can offer, clogging up holes, sort of plugging leaks as a Band-Aid man. And he did that for the Atlanta Hawks obviously wonderfully. Despite this incredible defense by Jeff Teague, Isaiah Thomas splits two, but Millsap is there for an incredible play. He's not making those eye-popping defensive plays anymore, but there are more of those sorts of plays on film than I maybe imagined when I first went into this. Here, Cam Johnson in last year's playoffs drives from the slot, but Millsap is there to erase it. He doesn't get up as high as he used to, obviously, but the awareness and the motor in many cases is still there. So he's able to act as that backline help. He still has very active hands on drivers there, stripping Dario Saric on the drive. And yes, there are possessions that look like this where, once again, motor's on. He's in great position to make a play on CJ McCollum here, but he just doesn't have the vertical pop maybe that he once used to, or that short area quickness and burst to affect as many shots as he once did. But as we can see by the steals and blocks stocks per 36 minutes, again, a very loose way to measure defensive activity. He's really right in line with his career averages. Again, this tells nothing close to the full picture of a defender's abilities. But when you're looking at guys that are often used as the low man, or just often in situations where they need to protect the rim and act as a band-aid for the defense, he's generally not fallen off as much as maybe some people would have thought, including myself. If we start here in 2012, his last year in Utah, there's not much fall off in this department or in the overall deflections department. I believe that's only down marginally as well, other than his ridiculous peak defensive year in 2016. Where the fall off comes, as I mentioned earlier, is that short area burst. And we see it sometimes when he's meeting drivers on the perimeter. Here, CJ McCollum will have a lane on the left side as Millsap meets him above the arc. And even though there's about 4-5 feet of space between them, once CJ makes his move, if Millsap's flat-footed, he just doesn't have the juice to get over there and not commit a foul. He bumps him because he can't get over in there in time, and it's free throws for CJ McCollum. Denver really did not do Millsap any favors in last year's playoffs because they asked him to sort of navigate that sort of situation a lot. They would ask him to show and recover, which was really their primary ball screen coverage versus the Suns. And here we can see he does an okay job forcing Campaign towards the sideline, getting the ball out of his hands, and then recovering. But overall, the recoveries and the rotations he'd have to make were not always that short. They weren't always that clean. And even then, it's not too bad, and it results in not a wide open, but a very good look for Cam Johnson. The Nets obviously will not be asking Millsap to do these sorts of coverages. They won't be asking him to slide all over the court. Teams averaged about 283 passes a game versus the Nuggets last year. And again, this is a very paper napkin mathy sort of stat, but that number was about 269 versus the Nets across the year. And if anything, it indicates that because of the Nets' consistent switching, the soft switching, sort of dragging teams into more isolation-heavy basketball against them, it slows down the offense. This in turn makes Millsap's reads a lot easier, and for a guy who already sees the game the way he does so smartly, this could lead to even more defensive production than we saw from him in Denver, despite, an increase in age. And if there's one worry about his limitations in short space, it could be a sort of Blake Griffin effect versus the Celtics last year, where they had success even though the Nets were soft switching versus Boston's ball handlers. If you got any sort of downhill momentum, Griffin was not great at sliding his feet. Here, he can't really contain Tatum, who, to be fair, is Jason Tatum. But here, versus Austin Rivers in a game versus Denver, it's a switch, but it's a pseudo drop. And because Austin Rivers has momentum downhill versus Griffin, a simple in and out cross and Griffin is just caught flat-footed. If there's a worry with Millsap on defense, it's this sort of thing, versus the smaller, shiftier guards, a Dennis Schroeder per se. If he isolates Millsap with any sort of momentum, it's going to be hard for the Nets' new forward to keep his feet moving and keep guards like that in front. But overall, my takeaway on Millsap's defense is that Denver put him in a lot of unfavorable positions, especially down the stretch last year, and I think that may have contributed to a lot of the noise around him, possibly being unplayable, as he was called in the playoffs, or more calmly, just a negative defender. I don't think we'll see that in Brooklyn. The simple scheme, as Matt Brooks did a great job of pointing out on his podcast with Mark Schindler, gives the Nets defenders so much less to think about. And with a guy who already processes the game like Millsap, that's just going to increase his value on defense. So overall, I came away very optimistic about Millsap's potential fit with the Nets. Higher on the offense, but I do think he'll be an impactful defender. He'll make clean rotations when he has to, and could offer a little bit more in help rim protection than maybe otherwise thought. So overall, I'm really excited to watch what he can add to this roster.